This week on Business Brief, a look at changes to small business administration loans that create restrictions for green card holders. Plus, how fluctuations in international trade policies are affecting Missouri's soybean industry. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Juliana Mejia, and I'm joined by my co-host, Trevor Grandin. Trevor, this is your first time hosting a Business Brief episode, right?
Indeed it is, but this is not my first time in front of a microphone. So I used to announce on KBIA, and I am a total podcast nerd, so I'm so glad to be here on Business Brief with you.
That's great to hear, and I'm excited to be hosting with you these next few months, Trevor. Now, let's jump into this week's headlines. Non-farm employers in the U.S. added 130,000 jobs in January, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, an estimated 82,000 of which were in the healthcare sector. Job gains previously reported in November and December were found to be overstated and were revised downward by a total of 17,000 for both months. Other sectors with large job gains included social assistance, primarily in family and individual services, and construction.
December's retail sales showed no change from the previous month, falling short of expectations. Economists were predicting a 0.4% increase from November to December. While some business sectors saw a decline in sales like furniture and electronics, others like building materials and garden stores saw a solid increase. The retail sales report was delayed because of last year's government shutdown.
Missouri's household income growth has been among the lowest in the nation for nearly 50 years, according to a recent analysis by nonprofit research organization, the Urban Institute. From 1970 to 2023, the state's median household income grew about 13% in inflation-adjusted dollars, while the national median increased 32%. Missouri ranked 48th in the country in terms of income growth. Researchers found that educational accomplishment is a factor most strongly associated with income growth across the states.
Centene, Missouri's largest public company, reported a net loss of more than $6.5 billion last year, marking a major shift from its net profits in previous years. The expiration of Affordable Care Act subsidies and major federal cuts to Medicaid in 2025 contributed to a decline in the company's managed care membership. Company officials said they are aiming to deliver, quote, meaningful margin improvement in 2026.
The National Telecommunications and Information Administration approved Missouri's plan for the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program in early January, which will enable people in unserved and underserved areas across the state to gain internet access. The $814 million allocated to the project will help install broadband infrastructure in thousands of locations across the state. Officials expect to begin dispersing funds to eligible service providers by the end of February.
The English men's national team and the Dutch men's national team both claim sites in the Kansas City area as their home bases for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. With 4 months until matches begin, there is only one of 4 available slots left for a team to claim, as Argentina also picked a site in the Kansas City area as its home base last week. All 3 teams will have lodging and training grounds in the neighboring areas.
We'll be right back with Business Brief after a quick word from our sponsor.
Are you ready to be inspired and empowered? Since 2023, That's What She Said Columbia has provided a platform for local women's voices, strengthening our community through the power of storytelling. On Saturday, April 11th at 7 p.m. at the Missouri Theater, the 4th annual That's What She Said Columbia will feature the intimate, powerful stories of 9 women from our community. 25% of the ticket sales will go to the Voluntary Action Center to provide essential hygiene products for women in need. Find us at columbia.shesaidproject.com and purchase your tickets now.
Welcome back to Business Brief. Our first story looks at a new policy change by the Small Business Administration that'll affect a specific demographic of Missouri entrepreneurs.
And who will it affect?
So it'll affect green card holders. These are legal, permanent residents who are on their path towards U.S. citizenship. It'll also have repercussions for loan providers.
So, what is this policy?
Reporter Crystal Sanchez has the details on the changes made to SBA loan eligibility.
Small businesses in Missouri received $8.4 billion in loans from the Small Business Administration in 2023. The SBA announced in early February that lawful permanent residents, referred to as green card holders, will no longer have access to these funds as of March 1st. And while it's too soon to tell the full impact the new policy will have, local lenders in charge of dispersing funds to underserved communities are having to make changes. Nonprofit organizations in particular will have to deal with finding funds elsewhere for their green card clients. Meta Smith is a chief credit officer with DreamSpring, an organization whose clients include green card holders. The SBA's Community Advantage program helps her deploy more funds to this demographic.
For DreamSpring to enter into that transaction on our own without a guarantee behind it, and it's based on projections, and there probably aren't sufficient assets within the business to fully collateralize the loan, we either will have to vastly change the amount we can lend, so we won't be able to provide as much capital as the entrepreneur is seeking, or we may have to partner with other organizations like ours so that we spread the risk across multiple organizations to see if we can make something work.
DreamSpring does not disperse SBA loans in Missouri, but Smith says that out of 19 multi-state SBA loans they funded last year, 5 of the business owners were green card holders. If they were to come back now, they would no longer qualify for SBA loans. Similarly, another nonprofit organizer thinks the policy poses an unnecessary obstacle.
It's a huge red flag because people are coming to this country because we as a country have said, hey, this is a land of opportunity. Like you come here for freedom, you come here for safety, you come here for these things. And then when people get here, like you find out very quickly that like that is not the case.
That's Edgar Palacios. He is the founder of Revolución Educativa, a Kansas City nonprofit that serves the Latino community. While he doesn't work with SBA loans, he helped start a community fund to help immigrants with legal, housing, and nutrition assistance. Palacios says that he feels disappointed because green card holders already face inequities as it is. This isn't the first time the SBA has made changes to how the immigrant community can do business. SBA loan programs previously allowed lending to businesses owned up to 49% by immigrants who were not naturalized U.S. citizens. But last April, the administration announced lending would be limited to businesses 100% owned by legal residents, a group that includes green card holders. Now, even green card holders won't be eligible for those funds. The administration cited fraud as a reason for new restrictions, saying the measures address cases of funds going to undocumented immigrants or applicants who lied about their age. Theodore Gutierrez with Missouri Small Business Development Center hopes the administration considers relaxing the policy in the near future.
I'm hoping that there'll be some sort of leeway down the line where once the fraud has subsided to a certain point, that there'll be a little bit more options for folks who might be here on a green card or might have a work visa that might want to start a business.
There are other options for green card holders to obtain funding. There are local community banks, different investors, and nonprofit organizations. But those options are limited. And Smith says the ramifications of the policy will be
huge. And I think there's just, if you think about having a roadblock putting up in front of you and being told no for 3 years, as soon as that gets lifted, are you like, yay, I'm so excited, I want to go charging forward?
There are no statistics for the number of green card holders with small businesses in Missouri. Overall, the state has 131,790 naturalized U.S. citizens, according to a 2024 report by the Pyramid Group. These are all individuals who file taxes and have the ability to work here lawfully.
Our next story is one that you worked on, right, Juliana?
Yeah, I looked into the impacts that ongoing trade disputes have had on Missouri's soybean industry. The crop is one of the state's largest exports, and China has historically been a big buyer. But this year, international trade tensions caused China to start buying more soybeans from Brazil.
And what was the reaction like here in the U.S.?
Well, President Donald Trump met with China's President Xi Jinping in October, and they negotiated an agreement for China to buy 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans by February. China has now fulfilled that agreement, and Trump seems optimistic that the country will purchase another 8 million metric tons this year.
So what does this all mean for Missouri soybean farmers?
Although China is purchasing the crop again, its established trade relationship with Brazil could reduce the amount of soybeans China chooses to voluntarily purchase from the U.S. I spoke with Bob Maltzberger, a senior research economist with the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute, about how these trade policy shifts will affect Missouri farmers as they prepare to plant this year's crops. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. Right now, we're looking to understand how the soybean industry was impacted last year and what that looks like going into 2026. With that being said, what does soybean trade look like internationally?
So we've had tariffs on different things, and there's been some back and forth with China. Well, China is the largest export destination for soybeans from the United States. We compete largely with Brazil. They became the lead exporter of soybeans for the world around 2013, 2014. It went back and forth for a couple of years. But ever since, they've been the leading exporter because they continue to expand area, so they continue to expand soybean production. So we're a second fiddle as far as global exports. But for all exports, for the whole world of soybeans, China will capture around 60% of all exports. So any soybean that's exported, 60% of that is going to China. So that's why it's a big deal for soybeans. They're capturing about 60% of all global soybeans. They're our number one export destination for soybeans. Not as important for corn, but they do import some corn. Some years, almost nothing because they're more self-sufficient. But for soybeans, they're not. They are the largest producer and consumer, I believe, of pork for the world. And so they feed their pork a lot of soybean meal. So that's why they need imports of soybeans. They crush it domestically, they feed it, and then they use a lot of soybean oil domestically for food production. That's why soybeans are important for China and why China is important to the U.S.
So I realize that soybeans are a top crop in the state, but how does Missouri factor into that international trade equation?
So the number of acres. So when we talk about row crops for the state of Missouri, I pulled the total state of the row crops for Missouri. And in the last 6 years, like 2020 through 2025, soybeans make up about 42% of all acres grown in the state of Missouri, whereas corn is only 26%. So that's our top two row crops. So that's why soybeans are more important in Missouri, because we typically, on any given year, will grow up to 20% more acres of soybeans than corn. So that gives you an idea why soybeans are important in Missouri. Now, of what we produce in Missouri, so just under 7% on average of the soybeans produced of the United States. Still a small number, relatively speaking, right? But it's more important to us because over 40% of our acres are soybeans. So that's why it's interested for Missouri. Now, I can tell you that on average, about 45% over the last 6 years of all U.S. soybeans produced were exported. So if it's less than half, but close to half of the soybeans we produce get exported. So when 40 plus percent, a little less than 50% of your soybeans are exported, if your primary destination for your exports aren't taking them, it has a big influence on our prices. And so national prices make an influence on what the farmer gets.
You've mentioned that crop farmers faced challenges last year. Did you mean on a national scale?
The national scale does translate into Missouri.
Right, of course, yes.
Because they're all facing the same input costs, and they're all facing the same output costs. And obviously, it's idiosyncratic at the farm level. Some farmers are good at marketing, and they'll hedge or do hedge-to-arrive contracts or basis contracts, and they'll take advantage of seasonal highs. Usually, the seasonally, prices go up in the spring, and they come down towards harvest, towards the end of summer. Right. They bottom out around harvest, and they kind of go up again, and that's the normal cycle. That doesn't always happen that way because global supply and demand like in 23-24, so the 2023 crop, farmers would have been better off selling at harvest because the prices continue to go down the rest of the marketing year. But that's the exception. Only about 30% of the time is the October price bigger than the February price. So the October price and the February price is what the RMA uses for revenue protection crop insurance. So the February futures price, on the closes from February is the spring price. The October closes is the harvest price. And for revenue protection, there's different types of revenue insurance that you can get. But if you don't have harvest price exclusion, basically they can take the better of to calculate their any kind of crop insurance indemnity. So on average, over the last 10 years, about 3 out of the 10 was the October price lower than February. Because usually you're better off contracting. Not all farmers do that, right? So some just sell it out of the field every year, or at least part of it, and they store the rest and try to sell it when prices go up.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It is now time for us to get into our words of the week. Trevor, what's your word this week?
So my word this week is winter.
Oh, interesting, especially since the weather has been uncharacteristically warm this week. Why winter?
Well, it's a mix. One, because the snowstorm we had a few weeks ago, and two, what it's like to travel in those wintry conditions. It's hard for some workers to commute in winter weather, and Missouri doesn't have a law protecting employees who struggle to get to work.
Yikes. So for some, it's either forgo a paycheck or brave the potentially slick roads. What can employees do to protect themselves from the dangers of traveling in these winter conditions?
So protections are generally left up to labor unions. For instance, Service Employees International Union Local 1 members are negotiating to better address the risks of winter weather.
If we're lucky, maybe we won't have much more of it this year.
Agreed. Well, that's all I've got this week. What is your word, Juliana?
My word is memorial.
Why memorial? Memorial Day isn't for a couple more months.
Well, I'm actually talking about Mizzou's Memorial Stadium. The athletic department recently announced it is selling the corporate naming rights of the stadium in an effort to generate more revenue.
Wow, big change. Where does the name Memorial Stadium actually come from?
It's been called Memorial Stadium since it opened exactly 100 years ago to honor the 117 MU students and alumni who died in World War I.
Well, I'm very curious on who's going to claim the name for the popular football stadium.
Yeah, me too. Especially as the stadium undergoes a $250 million renovation to accommodate even more fans. For our closing thought, here's Edgar Palacios, founder of Kansas City nonprofit Revolucion Educativa, speaking to common issues that many entrepreneurs face.
But at the end of the day, the real issue is that people have phenomenal ideas and they can structure them well. If people don't invest or if they don't figure out ways of scaling, we leave a lot of great ideas and resources on the table.
Well, that is all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Trevor Grandin and editors Riley Hindle, Kaylee Daruk, and Michael Stacy, I'm Juliana Mejia, and this has been Business Brief. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.